Time. So I'm excited to introduce our next panel, Hybrid Creativity for a Multicultural World. I'd like to introduce our amazing panel. I'm going to start with Lori Lyons. Lori is a photographer, journalist, creative consultant, and she is the first female, Black African-American female to be signed to Getty Images. So welcome, Lori. Next, we have Kenji Summers. He is the founder of the Passport Project, and he is also on the team for Locomotus and the Marcus Graham Project. Then we have Tanner Colby. He is a New York Times bestselling author of a novel called, or a book actually called Some of My Best Friends Are Black. I'll let him explain that to you. It's a great book. Then we have Anaki Esquerdo. He is the global creative director for Global Works. Renata Florio. She is the chief creative officer for Wing. And last but not least, Bazama St. John. She is the cultural branding manager for PepsiCo. So please welcome the panel. That's what microphones work like.
Well, thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate your time and attention. And I believe we're going to just start with a short video explaining Kenji Summers' foundation called the Passport Project.
Right, so I'll set this clip up. This is a trailer for the Passport Life web series in which we follow somebody that you might have seen today, Brian Blue, as he embarks on his first trip out of the United States of America. I started Passport Project because over 70% of Americans don't own passports, and even greater percentages of young people of color don't own passports. So Brian Blue was the recipient of our first Passport Project grant, and he's now a Passport Project fellow. And so not too dissimilar from How to Make It in America, the HBO series, but with a travel slant. So that is a little setup for the trailer. And if you could roll the clip, please.
Hey, this is what's gonna happen. I'll see you in like a year, and you can see how my brand is looking now.
Yeah.
And then when I feel like it's ready to approach you, I think we could like make something really cool.
Yeah, my name is Tanner Colby. I started out life in New York as a copywriter at Ogilvy, FCB, Saatchi, and some other agencies, and then left to go write books. I wrote a biography of John Belushi and Chris Farley, two biographies. It wasn't one biography. But then in 2008, and this is sort of why I'm on stage, I found myself fervently supporting America's first black president, yet only to come to the realization that I didn't actually know any black people. So, and one of the reasons I didn't know any black people is because I worked in advertising for 9 years. So I set out to write a book. I went and pitched my editor. I was like, why don't I write a book about sort of the history of racial integration, affirmative action, school busing, fair housing, all these policies that were supposed to bring black and white people together, and obviously they haven't. Sort of look at history from that point of view, and to my surprise, they said yes and gave me money. And so I wrote the book. It's called Some of My Best Friends Are Black, and it just came out this past July. And one of the chapters is about the history of racial integration on Madison Avenue. Okay.
Hi, I'm Iñaki Escudero. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Global Works. This is a multicultural agency / digital / general market here in New York. And besides being a Chief Creative Officer, I like to read. I read a book a week. I write a blog about the things that I find interesting. And just like you, in 2008, I realized that advertising wasn't fulfilling everything I really wanted to explore and do. And that's when I explore and venture out to do other things.
I'm Renata Florio. I'm from Brazil, a very multicultural country. I believe you've heard of it. I've been in New York for 1 year when I joined Wing, which is a multicultural agency of the Great Group. And contrary to some people, advertising does make a big part of my life. I was not an advertiser before. I graduated from language and literature and was a teacher. And because I started teaching people how to write, I said, you know what, I want to write and make more money than teaching, in Brazil at least. And so I'm really fond of advertising. I'm super happy, and I think we're living a very exciting age of communication. I'm happy to be here, by the way. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bose St. John, or Bosma St. John, formerly. I am the Music and Entertainment Marketing Director at PepsiCo, and my journey started at Spike DDB, hey, in advertising, hey, some colleagues in the house. And I traveled through the advertising world, through Arnold Worldwide as well, and then made the leap to the client side in 2005. Managed brands on Pepsi, Diet Pepsi, Mountain Dew, Sierra Mist, and then most recently, a year and a half ago, formed this new group, which is along the lines of music entertainment, to sort of socialize the concept of the efficiency of managing all those projects under one roof across the beverages portfolio for PepsiCo. And that's it.
You know, I wanted to speak today a little bit about, discuss the idea of what multicultural is. We hear this word all the time. We're having conferences about it. All of you have a very unique sort of career as far as being in the advertising industry. What do you get as your sense of multiculturalism today for yourself in the advertising industry? What is your definition of it?
Should we go in order, or?
Tanner, you can start.
I'll go. We've heard a lot recently about, America's becoming a majority minority country and the demographics are changing and all this. And I actually can't take credit for this line because I read it in a magazine a couple weeks ago. But the question is what is that actually going to mean? Are we going to be this quilt of different vibrant ethnicities that all have their unique individuality, or as this journalist said, are we going to be a nation where there's a whole lot of white people with the last name Rodriguez? And so which is it going to be? And my tendency is from what I've observed in researching the book is that I think we're going to lean towards the latter. Because as much as diversity is a noble goal, and as much as multiculturalism has this noble spirit behind it, for 400 years, assimilation has been the engine that has made America run. Immigrant groups come to America and they assimilate into the white majority. And they become whiter, but then the white majority becomes a little less white. It used to just mean white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Now, white can mean a whole lot of things. The definition is always changing. And it's expanded to include a lot of Hispanics and Asians. And it really just means you're assimilated. It doesn't mean white anymore. Or it's meaning white less and less. And there are a lot of old white people who are still hung up on being white that are sort of de-assimilating themselves by refusing to accept the new multicultural reality, right? They're sort of becoming a rump faction to themselves, and white people who accept the new multicultural majority are blending sort of seamlessly with it, intermarrying and so forth. So what happens in most industries is that even if the white cultural hegemony is receding, white people still have pretty much all the money in this country. And white people are still the center of gravity in terms of gaining access to social opportunity and wealth and power. And so groups still have to differing degrees, get access to that majority in order to move up. And so I think in general, we're still going to gravitate towards a central cultural norm that will get more tan and more beige as the years go by, but it's not going to be this patchwork quilt, is how sort of my 2 cents of where I see it going.
Inaki, how do you feel about that? What is your...
Well, in my experience, we have 80 people at the agency, and there are 35 different countries represented. Every day, clients ask us to do work for at least 5 different cultures in the US. And if we didn't have someone from that culture represented in our creative department or account services department or planning department, we wouldn't be able to actually understand the nuances to speak to those cultures in this country. We learned that once you cross the border and once you land in America, you basically make up your own culture here. So Latinos are no longer someone from Brazil or Spain, but U.S. Hispanic, and they are creating a very interesting culture. You and I were talking about brokers of culture, and it's because they create a culture so rich and so interesting that they start influencing mainstream, and it's fascinating to be dissecting what's happening because there are a lot of things in Latinos, Asians, African Americans creating something very unique in the U.S. right now.
Yeah, I pretty much feel that being the culture of multicultural thought is where you have everyone having a chance. That's how I like to see it. That's how it's been to me. Like you are able to be in different places and in different countries within different cultures and still be able to express yourself, get your rights, get your thoughts heard. And that's what I see as the physical multicultural environment. But I also see it as the digital multicultural environment, where I think it's even easier, broader, and better, where I can watch a video produced by a little girl in China and have lots of fun with that video without even knowing Chinese. So I think we can also start opening our minds to a better version of this multicultural, which is everybody's entitled to sneak a peek of everything that is going on in the world.
How do you feel that, if you're from Brazil, if you're from Spain, if you're African American here in New York, when you are working with an advertising agency, do you feel like just because of your ethnicity, you're immediately labeled multicultural? And does that affect the perception of the quality of the work that you're producing?
I'll take this one. I've worked at nothing but general market agencies. And so the last creative agency I was at full time is called BBH, Bartle Bogle Hegarty. And we did work for general market clients, including Google, New York City and Company, which is New York City's tourism board, Johnny Walker, Axe. So we're speaking to a broad range of people, usually 18 to 44. But I think most of the times when I think about this question, can you repeat the last part of the question?
Do you think that if your work is labeled multicultural, that the perception of the quality of your work is valued in a different way, for better or for worse?
And many times I think that is kind of what keeps HR or creative departments from hiring people of color, because it's the thought that they don't have the cultural competence to be able to be agile enough in an environment where you're working on general market. Mm-hmm. So I think that has happened quite often and continues to be a way to exclude.
Now, I know, Renata, you've won many, many awards in Brazil. When you're working in Brazil and you're Brazilian, is there also this factor coming into the work about how to be multicultural when you are a native person in your country? Is that something that's talked about? Is that something that's reflected upon?
Well, the awards thing, I think it's a very good example of showing how you can be multicultural without even leaving your country. One of the most important awards in our business is the festival in France, in Cannes, and people from all over the world, of many countries, and blah, 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 they are all there, and we work for being awarded there. I myself was awarded there, I was awarded there, and I feel that this is a recognition. Back to the country, in terms of my country, we are very big. We are like 190 million people. So it's like there are castes. And even if we speak the same language, we have different colors, different thoughts, and sometimes, and many often, very often, different the average income. We have different income. So we are always talking and trying to be multicultural. I don't know if I'm making sense, but the fact is, what I'm trying to say is, yes, in Brazil, even with being there and knowing the language, there were times that I had to go through barriers of different cultures. And besides, I've always been a woman so far, so I had to face that too. So, you know, the first label was woman. Second label was she wasn't graduated in advertising. Third, short. So then it goes, right? I mean, there are many labels that we are exposed to, but I don't know if I answered your question though.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I did. Okay.
And I actually have a question for you, Inaki. I know that you've said before that, you know, 10, 15 years ago, if you spoke or wrote Spanish, you can get a job at a Latin agency. How is that? Has that changed, and how has that changed?
I think you need to bring more to the table at anything that you do today, at any job in any industry. It's not enough to just graduate from a college and just bring the title to your first job. I think today when I interview people, I always expect that they are going to be very good at what they do, but I also want to know what they are doing in terms of personal interests, personal projects. What are you doing with your life besides being a copywriter? Mm-hmm. I think you need to bring more to the table no matter what.
Well, in terms of, you know, personal and professional skills, you know, seems to be a trend where before, if you were just a copywriter, that was enough. But now hearing people say, if you're a copywriter, we need people who are copywriters and can code. So I wanted to ask each of you, like, how do you stay ahead of the cultural curve and the technology curves that are involved in what you do in your industry, in your titles?
I think you touched on it, like passion projects, experimenting socially, trying things that make you a bit uncomfortable, and finding other people that are very different from yourself, that have different thought processes. So many times in advertising, it's if you're a copywriter, going to where the programmers are, the creative technologists, and figuring out, all right, what's Java? Oh, how do you start that? And so I think we have a lot of resources today, like codeacademy.com is a very good way to pick up on base learning and understanding and writing basic code. Skillshare.com is a great way to upskill. You know, that's one thing that I learned a lot working in advertising, is that you're always having to seek out your own opportunities to gain new skills, because sometimes you're working at such a rapid pace. You probably notice this on the client side and the agency side, that you don't have people that can just sit down and train you and walk you through things. So you have to be very curious and go out and find those opportunities in the real world.
And Dinaki?
I think staying ahead of the cultural curve is a full-time job. And if you were to pay attention to everything happening out there, I don't think I will have time to do my job. But you need to go to the 2 or 3 resources that you know they are going to reward you. The BBH Labs blog is a great source of inspiration. There are some people, it depends on what your interest is, but blogging, Fast Company, Wire magazine, they have great blogs. That's kind of very fast. Every morning, that's what I check out. And
Well, I should say with Inaki, if all of you don't already know, his energy level is pretty profound. He reads one book every week, and he's been doing that for 5 years. He has a very extensive blog about creativity. And it seems like although, you know, you're a creative, you spend a lot of intellectual time searching out information from a really wide net of places and actually discuss that online as well. Yeah.
it's hard.
I think it's also true that you, to a certain extent, you have to stay, you know, ahead of the cultural curve. But you know, I try and go against that grain completely because I know I'll never keep up with everything. And having just put out my book, and we were talking earlier, you have to be your own brand today and have Twitter and all this stuff, and I hated it, and I wasn't very good at it. But you kind of have to read what no one else is reading. Like, so for my book, you know, researching the history of racial integration, there aren't a whole lot of white people thumbing through the archives of Ebony magazine from the 60s and 70s. But it's all online, and I spent, you know, months just pouring through all the great essays that, like, you know, James Baldwin and all these guys were writing back then. there aren't a whole lot of people in my world reading that right now, so that gave me a cultural insight that not a lot of people have, and then I came out with this book. But like local newspapers, like who reads local newspapers from Kentucky and Ohio? Well, there's a lot of, if you want to learn about America, that's where it is. More so than Gawker. Everyone in New York is reading Gawker. So if you want an edge that's going to give you what those, thousands of people in New York are following Gawker is go read something else.
Well, Bosma, I had a question for you in regards to this. I know that in your career, you've basically had experiences which you could talk about where you wanted to up your skills to get new positions, and it was a bit of a challenge getting the support for that. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, I think that's probably the hardest part, right, about continuing to be on the cutting edge of whatever culture or to improve yourself is just the confidence and sort of the support to do that. I think it's impossible, to continue to push yourself in that way without a supportive system that's going to help you to continue to do that, to talk about it, to explore those options, all of that. It's not a singular mission. And so having a community that supports that is going to be as rich of an experience as having, the pursuit of looking for publications that no one else reads or whatnot. I mean, when I was making the transition from Spike DB to Arnold, my reason for doing that was because I wanted to have additional experiences that were not just steeped in the African American experience, but could transfer to pharma or to whatever other business that needed a whippersnapper like me, right? But additionally, I think the support that you need in order to make that jump is one that you really have to depend on your community and those who are sometimes even just like-minded or to be propelled by those who don't even agree with those moves. So making the choice to do that and to pursue other opinions and to pursue those who may not agree with you or to take the risk is one that you have to do in order to just evolve.
Well, I know that you had mentioned to me earlier that, when you realized that you didn't want to move forward, there were people who actually told you, well, you can't do that. You can't go on the client side. You're not smart enough.
Right.
How did you, personally and professionally decide, what, I can do this?
Well, I probably can't repeat the type of things that I said in response to that. But yeah, I think there was a lot of backlash against that, right? Because again, sometimes you're only propelled by as far as your community will sometimes allow you to be, and so if you're trying to stretch yourself beyond those bounds, you'll encounter, fears that sometimes are not even your own or may pick up on something that you have that then won't allow you to then, express those feelings and, explore those different options. And so for me, the challenge for moving then from Arnold to the client side was a difficult one just because there weren't a lot of people in my circle who, one, understood it, two, supported it, or three, were like, well, why in the hell would you want to go and analyze data all day? That's no fun, But for me, the challenge was bigger than that. It wasn't about just going over to the client side. It was about getting a fuller picture, at least for me, on marketing and trying to do something else for myself that I felt I couldn't get in the position I was in currently.
Well, Renata, speaking of propelling yourself, you were extremely successful in Brazil. I'm sure it could have been very easy for you to stay there and continue working and doing very well. What was it like for you to transition to make the decision that I'm very comfortable here, I do well, but now I'm going to go to a foreign country and work in advertising to a completely different market? What was that like for you?
Well, that's actually the most important question, I think. Even when I came here I think I had like 18 interviews at the Great Group, and one of the people interviewing me said, why do you want to come here? You're good there. Your country is doing good, so what the hell? And that was very encouraging, by the way. Well, there is the most important, the two most important things were, first, in Brazil, although we are gigantic, we live within this giganticness, meaning we speak Portuguese, so we don't speak the language that the whole region speaks. We think of ourselves in the advertising marketing, especially, as the very best. And I felt that I really deserved to see how the things could be, or even if it's not better, different. The second reason was mostly because I always loved the passport life, so I was very excited with his project because I think that we should live abroad. I lived abroad when I was an exchange student. I was like 16 years old. Then I lived in Italy. I lived in England when I was young and beautiful, and life was easier. And I really wanted my children to live this too, to have the opportunity of, because life is not only about work, but you can live through work. I mean, work was an opportunity I had to bring the kids. My husband is a commercial director, so that allows him to go back and forth to Brazil, because it has to be said, without love, I think I wouldn't have been doing anything. So there is all this concept behind my career, which is I have a great family, I love my husband, I have a black lab, so I'm very common in the terms of being a human being. And that was it. So I said, you know what, Brazil is there, my family is there, and I'm gonna try it. And so far, it's been great. It's paid a lot already.
Well, Kenji, there's a whole audience full of young people who are just starting in the industry and want to get a start in the industry. Do you have any feelings about, people are looking for jobs here in New York, that Americans may actually have to start being nomadic and move through the world and start job hunting in all these other foreign countries if they want to get into advertising? Is that a possibility, do you see?
Yeah, I think it is a possibility. There's one portfolio school that I know that does this pretty well, Miami Ad School. I know you have the ability to take internships and do rotations in different parts of the world. I think more people should just think about that in advertising and outside of advertising. But for people in advertising, you gotta understand you have to have a insatiable appetite for culture. And if you're only being exposed to a culture in America, and even less than that, in your city or neighborhood that you're from or living, that's extremely limiting. And I think as we continue to become more globalized, we're gonna have to understand the cultures, particularly of Latin America, a lot more than we do now in general market agencies. And so if you have the opportunity, first thing I would say to do, if you don't come out of here with your quote unquote job, which if you get it, great. If not, I think there's even better opportunities to backpack. Go see some of the world. And if it's cost prohibitive, actually reflect on what you spent your money on over the past year and see if you can take the next year to prepare to backpack. Because I promise you, I had the experience. I was working as a strategist at BBH, an agency where, many people in advertising consider it to have the strongest strategic planning department. And I ended up leaving there and backpacking through Europe for a month. And I came back, and I promise you I was not the same. And I've been able to freelance for agencies that I never thought I would be able to freelance for, because I came back with a true global perspective and a curiosity that I still do not have an ability to solve. And it continues to grow as I travel to more places. So if I would give any advice, it would really be bootstrap, travel, see something, and interview at agencies around the world. I mean, they'll be impressed that you went and took the time to go somewhere.
Bozoma, you are originally from Ghana, and you said you came here when you were about 12 years old. And I read where you said that, you definitely feel like you were bicultural. Can you talk about that and how that may have influenced your work that you do, your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because the ironic thing about working for Spike Lee, first out of college, was that, his line about, we're not one big monolithic group, is so true because, I think being an African American in this country, it's just assumed, that you're not from anywhere else, right?
Right.
Or that your culture is of the African American experience, which for me was not true. And so being bicultural in that way, in which, Ghanaian parents, Ghanaian food at home, Ghanaian language spoken at home, and in my home now, means that I look at the world in a different way than what I would say the majority of African Americans do. And so even in my workspace or how I approach, the world is a little bit different. Now that said, it doesn't, I encourage all of us is, we, even at, my office, and as we look at different cultures. I think the point that was made earlier about, the U.S. Hispanic and, sort of lumping that whole group into one, it's a very sensitive matter to me anyway, because I see the differences and I feel like there are ways to be multicultural without having to loop people into these groups that then assume it's multicultural but aren't really.
Right. I know, Inaki, at your company, Global Works, you have a program, I think it's a weekly program called MindWorks. Can you talk to us about that a bit?
Inspired by Google's 20%, that every employee is supposed to spend 20% of their time on personal projects, we wanted to give people the chance to spend some time bringing forward things that they found interesting. So every Friday, we decided to meet for an hour and a half, 2 hours, to just explore whoever's opinion of interesting was. So it took a while to get traction, but then it became something that it became a habit, and now I don't think that we can imagine a week without some kind of discussion about what anybody's opinion of interesting is.
Well, now that the population of America is changing, we've all heard the statistics that I believe now, in this past year, there are more births of children of color than of Caucasian children. Do you guys feel that, this idea of multicultural agencies and sort of being the minority agencies is going to change into being the mainstream agency, the general market agency in the near future?
Well, I think as the general market becomes, suffused with multiculturalism, by default, then the need for specific niche agencies is going to go away. It's going to be less and less. Because the so-called general market white agencies now, they're mostly white now, but they control them, most of the money in the market share. And so if the ones that see the future coming culturally and are able to pivot and capture it, they're still going to be, the major industry players, and we won't need a Uniworld or a Burrell to serve a niche anymore, because the niche is now, suffused seamlessly into the whole. You still have ethnic clusters in America, but you don't really have the same strong lines between them. You have middle-class blacks who listen to, classical music and NPR, and you have white kids who love hip-hop and urban culture, and there's just no clear delineation anymore. So to balkanize the work across multicultural agencies makes less and less sense.
Kenji, you groaned when he said that. We started to say that. Why is that?
I think marketing is going too fast to keep it in one home. So what that means is having an agency that does all of your work, from the above the line spots to branded content to digital. I think it's truly impossible for one agency to service. There's not that much great talent. I know we're here because we all feel we're talented, but there's not a lot of great agency talent. So the fact that one agency can do all that work for you kind of makes me feel like that agency's lying. And so I think working with a lot of different nimble agencies that can respond in real time to consumer behavior is vital. And yes, I think it's going to take a lot of different agencies to service a brand, particularly a brand that's multinational and that has changing consumer bases. And I don't think you can segment audiences anymore by demographics. I think it has to do with shared values, interests, and I think the behaviors. I think following the behaviors of consumers is going to be a lot more important than segmenting them and having an agency that can come in and say they're going to do that type of work.
Well, I don't think it's going to be one big monolithic agency can fit all your needs. You're definitely going to have lots of niches, maybe even more niches than before, but all of them are going to be bound up in one seamless communication system. Like before, in the 70s and 80s, you had the general market and Time magazine, and you had the black market and Ebony magazine, and there was a wall. And that's going to go away. Over here, you're going to have lots of, it's going to be a necklace and a web of all these different interlocking interests and demographics and agencies, and this one will serve this niche and that one will serve this, but they're all tied up in one web. The whole idea of general market is here, black agencies are here, which was kind of a false idea to begin with, and it was mostly a political construct and had nothing to do with really the culture of America or what even made business sense. that is slowly going to die. And the problem is now we have all these political laws in place that say it has to be that way. X% of the pie has to go to the minority share, and then X% stays with the general market share. And the fallacy of what those laws that were created was, it basically said, okay, you know, the general market agency gets 90% of the Pepsi account, and you've got to give 10% to the minority agency of the Pepsi account because that's their political due and they're being biased against and they're ignored. Well, the reality is that as we grow to a 50% minority country, the minority set-aside doesn't grow to 50%. It stays small, it stays marginal because that was what it was intended to be. So what I don't hear anyone talk about, like ever, in talking in these diversity meetings is that this is still basically a legally segregated industry. And only instead, after 1970, instead of laws saying that black people cannot work for white agencies, we created a system whereby they created minority set-aside incentives that paid black agencies to go away and form their own industry. It was a self-incentivized segregation. And so the industry sort of went like that and separated itself. And that's been the legacy of what those laws are. And unfortunately, the black agencies and the multicultural agencies, a lot of them have been marooned over here. And Spike Lee was one of the first to sort of like muscle himself across that line and work on both sides of the line. But there's a legal segregation that goes on in this industry that has to be addressed.
Hey, can I just add an opinion to that? Is that I think regardless of the agencies and how they're segregated, I mean, I'm dealing with this now, which is that it's at the end of the day about, the consumer and getting your product to market and getting folks to buy it. And so especially at a company like Pepsi, which feeds on pop culture, if the culture is being driven by a particular interest group or a particular demographic, that's who you're targeting. And so regardless of which agency is going to bring the idea that's going to get that message across, I really don't care. At the end of the day, I need that to happen. So for me, it matters about what is driving pop culture and therefore the influence of those folks who are driving that pop culture and their insights are important to me. So from a business standpoint, I think, we can talk about the segregation of agencies and all that. At the end of the day, it really is going to come up to from a business standpoint, what's going to drive that business? What ideas are we buying to help connect the consumer insights to the business need, and that's what's going to drive it.
Yeah, very quickly, I'd like to add, because who am I to discuss the laws in the United States? I barely know the laws in my country, but I can discuss something that comes like. I'm always like the half-full glass kind of person, so I do respect everything that has to do with these issues, but I feel that for you who are young and full of energy and everything, it's all about the idea. So the clients, they don't care anymore where the idea is coming from. All they want is someone who gets inside their room and say, this is it, and you believe it, and for some reason you prove that this is going to happen. And so, okay, things should be changed, I'm sure, but while things are changing, you can help just providing ideas, just reading and expressing yourselves. I think that would help a lot change this backstage to which it's harder to tackle and do something, right?
To Tanner's point, I think it's true. There's a lot of laws that have gone through and that have set up agencies, particularly those of color, for failure, because really they didn't innovate. Many of those agencies that you mentioned, they didn't innovate, so they don't have a service offering to take on larger pieces of business. But what I think a lot of young people, particularly I see in this audience, have an opportunity to do is innovate outside of advertising or get in advertising, learn the skills, develop the connections, get the experience, and go to Silicon Valley or go into Hollywood and find a way to incorporate and transfer those skills into a different field and then come back in. And when you come back in, now you have, to your point of being hybrid, now you have these hybrid skills that people that just said, I'm just going to be a writer. Like, you could have just been a writer your whole career and you've been fine, right? You would have had a nice severance package at the end of the day after layoffs happen in the future. But he went and innovated somewhere else. And so now if he went back into advertising, he's coming through not only with a better title, but he's coming through to have better ideas because he became part of culture. So what I would say, if you really wanted to change the world of advertising, start changing culture, because that's what advertising chases, right? So advertising chases culture because culture is created by consumers. At the end of the day, advertisers want you to buy things that you probably don't need and believe things you probably don't understand to get you to buy things you probably don't need. So understand, if you could create the culture as a consumer, you control how they're going to advertise.
Well, one thing that I wanted to discuss, in particular with you, Bozma, is that, now more and more agencies and products are really relying on user-generated content. And when I was looking at the Pepsi site, your projects with Lil Wayne, you have the users deciding what footage should be used, what the music should be. They're giving content to the actual client. So that makes me wonder, I know it's great to have that direct contact with your demographics, but is there a point where, you as a client say, well, what do we need an ad agency for?
Oh, God, that's like, put me on the spot. I think there's a healthy balance, right? I wouldn't lie and say, user-generated content is not like the fad of the day. It is, and so we're going to be able to use that as much as possible, but there has to be a balance in what your mix looks like. I think at the very end, we can all go on YouTube and see all kinds of user-generated content, but do we want to look at that all day? No, I don't think so. There's probably a balance of high production value, good aesthetic, great idea, based on insight, that is going to drive the business in a way that somebody with a funny idea and their own little, iPhone is not going to get you. So there has to be a balance of both allowing consumers to have power in creating the message that is then given back to them, but also taking those insights and dialing that down into bite-sized pieces that are entertaining, interesting, and can push your message.
Inaki, I wanted to speak to you about, the idea that I've heard you mention about being disruptive in culture and in business. And, a lot of people who are in this audience, the fact I think is that, moving forward, even though people are creatives, you're going to have to also be your own business person to some extent, whether you're going to start your own agency or you're going to be self-employed. So can you talk about the idea of being disruptive creatively and then on a business side, because you're also the partner of your agency, Global Works?
Yeah, I think it's hard to be disruptive in the advertising business as it is today, because there's a lot of, it's like a big dinosaur that is taking a long time to change, and it's hard to change the ways of what has been in place for so long. I think in my case, I feel very lucky that I'm in a smaller agency that is independent, and I don't really have to answer to a large network. But that freedom also has the counter of, wow, I really have a lot of responsibility, because you never know what is going to happen. So disruptive is good, and taking chances is good, but you have to scale. You have to start small and then realize, the consequences of changing an entire agency's model by introducing new ways of doing things, because you saw that in Google was very good, or BBH worked great, or getting rid of account services and having only planners and creative. What are the consequences of that? And I think that it's good to run small experiments, as we call it, but some of those experiments fail after a month or 2 months, and you realize, wow, I'm happy that I did it in a small way, because if I had done this, I don't think I would be a partner today.
Right. Well, we're going to have to open up some time for questions at this point. So if any of people in the audience have any questions, should I pick people, or are you going to go ahead? Okay. We'll start with this woman here in the front.
Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather. My question's particularly for Bo. I am in the entertainment public relations right now. I was wondering if you had any advice on how to switch into entertainment advertising.
That's a hard question. I mean, I think like most businesses, everything is, sort of the ladder system, right? I think Kenji made a great point. It's like getting the experiences and building up a portfolio that other folks don't have so that you have a unique perspective on the entertainment business. It's probably one of the harder ones to be a part of because you really do have to be on the cutting edge all of the time. You can't miss a beat. You need to know that Nicki cursed out Mariah Carey last night. You know what I mean? You need to know that stuff, otherwise you're missing the boat. And therefore, it causes you to have to get a range of experiences. So I would say the best thing is, well, from just a business standpoint, it's like who are the brands that you see that are doing it the right way or the way that you're impressed by, because otherwise you're probably not going to enjoy the work. Start there, and then also verify, like make a variety of experiences that will then connect to something larger and give you a difference of opinion.
Hi, my question, I guess, is for everybody. So I know how you're talking about how the agencies and advertising is changing, but my question is, how do you get businesses to hire you if you are different? Like, my background has nothing to do with advertising, but every time I'm doing something, they're like, hey, maybe you should do this. And then when I show somebody my portfolio, they're like, but you don't have any advertising. I'm like, but I'm trying. Like, this is what I'm saying. So how are you supposed to get past that barrier if they're saying we want something different, and then you provide something different, and then like, this is not what we are?
I don't think you are talking to the right people.
Yeah. My first boss in the business, if you had a portfolio and came out of an ad school, he didn't want you. His standard questions in all his interviews was, do you see yourself in the industry in 5 years? And if you said no, that meant you got the job. Because he hired cartoonists and painters and sculptors and stand-up comedians, novelists. He did not hire a single person who came from an ad background, which had the net result of our department being sort of like the odd stepchild out in the agency, and people didn't really get us. But it created a unique creative mix, and so you have to find those people who are looking for that. I don't know how you do that. I stumbled into it by accident.
I think meeting more people that are doing exactly that and that have interesting backgrounds. I think you have a few up here that really do. So maybe we know some companies or agencies that might be interesting to look into.
Hi, my name is Jose Garcia, and I'm the HR engineer. My question in particular is for Naki. I noticed you said that you read a lot of things from PBH, Fast Company, and then all these great different books. When you're reading, how do you decide if something that you're reading is worth paying attention to or making a mental note of, and if it's not?
Thank you for asking that question. I think it's, somehow everything happens when it needs to happen. I don't know how I come to read things that matter to that point, or I make the connections, and I think that's an important point. I think we kind of fly through the idea of connecting things that other people don't see, and it's that connection. That's why being exposed to as many things as possible, you never know when that connection is going to happen. So you might read something in a book that is interesting, and then that day there is a briefing in your agency about something, and you go, that's the connection. So that's why you can never stop doing that. You cannot take a day off because the connections happen unexpectedly.
Sorry, guys, we have to cut off the questions. I'm sorry. I know this is an amazing panel, and please, feel free to follow up with them and tackle them once they walk out into the lobby. But before you run, we have another amazing presentation happening from Digitas. We have Fritz Desir, the Vice President and Group Creative Director, and Sonia Jarrett, who is the Creative Recruitment Lead, and she is going to give you guys a discussion on how to be viable in a digital market, which I think is very important, so stick around. Okay? Thank you guys so much.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to How to Make Yourself Viable in the Digital Age. I'm Sonia Jareth. I'm the Creative Recruitment Lead at Digitas. And this is Fritz DeSier. He's a Vice President, Group Director of Head of Experience Design at Digitas. And we're going to walk you through the recruitment part, as well as how hiring managers think when they're assessing your backgrounds and your portfolio when we are looking for candidates to fit our opens. Okay, so we'll start with recruitment. I wanted to give you a quick run through what recruiters do, or talent acquisition specialists, so you understand how to best work with us, how to speak to us when you're looking for opportunities at our agency or any opportunity within a creative or a marketing role within an agency. So talent acquisition specialists and recruiters, I like to consider us talent scouts. We are always looking for best-in-class talent for our roles, and recruiters are generally assigned disciplines. Mine is creative. Sometimes there would be a recruiter who specializes in project management, production, or account management, marketing. Or you'd even have someone who specializes in technology. So bigger the company, the more recruiters assigned to different roles. The smaller the company, you usually have a recruiter who handles all the roles. There are also external recruiters sometimes that you would probably get to know, who we would give opportunities to if we needed more, if we didn't have enough bandwidth. We'd sometimes assign certain roles to an external recruiter for specific opens within our company. And when our internal hiring managers have needs, they pretty much sit down with us and they go through their requirements, their wish list, and we pretty much assess the type of person that would make sense for those openings before we start to put on a recruiting strategic cap. So I'll let you know how that ties into social media and online networking, beginning with how you could reach out to us if you were looking for opportunities or looking to connect with the right people at a company. LinkedIn is a great way to begin. What I'd recommend, if you haven't already done this, is utilizing the keyword search feature. When you go into the advanced search option, if you're looking for a creative recruiter, as myself or one of my colleagues, you would type in creative, you would go into recruiter, and then you would look at the vicinity and where you're looking for. So say you were looking in the Digitas area, 10010, within 50 miles, you would pretty much look for a search there. Sorry. So your results would come up, and all the creative recruiters in the area would be there to connect with. And then you could pretty much research the types of companies you're interested in, the types of accounts that we have, and figure out who makes sense to reach out to. My recommendation is to build your network and get to know as many people as possible. So because sometimes one place might be hiring, another place might be slow, you kind of want to get your name out there to as many places as possible and get to know the recruiters so then they can remember you when they have something and touch base with them from time to time. Another way to find opens is through Twitter as well. I like to use Twitter because it's inexpensive. I feel like it'll help me hone in on the right skill sets with certain keywords as well. So follow a corporate fan page, follow a LinkedIn company page, a Facebook page, as well as a Twitter company page, or your favorite recruiter. Some recruiters like to keep it personal. I like to use it professionally as well. And it's pulled a lot of great candidates for me because sometimes they pass it on to people they know. So I definitely like using social media as much as possible to reach different people and casting a wider net. And how I use LinkedIn, it's the reverse. If I was looking for you, if you were a junior art director and I was looking for someone with a digital background, I would type in digital and in the vicinity. So the more specific keywords you use in your profile, the better chances you'll get pulled by me in a search. If you're vague and you don't have the right keywords or areas of expertise, I'll never find you. So you want to be found. Even if you might not be looking for a job right now, maybe there's something I could talk to you about for later. It's a way we can reach out to each other. So by my search, if I was doing a digital junior art director search, these would be the results. I also do searches on portfolio sites such as Coreflow or Behance. So another suggestion would be making sure you have as many samples up there as possible. You're under the right categories. If it's art direction, if it's advertising, and in your vicinity, what you're looking for, try to be as clear as possible with your background and who you are and what you want. And the review will start right there. As soon as I have an open, that's what I do. And then I'll ping you, and that's when the dialogue will begin. So I'm going to pass it over to Fritz now, who'll go into when interviewing starts and opportunities at that stage.
Thank you, Sonia. First, I just want to thank everyone that's here. How are you guys doing? Good, good, louder, fine, yes, okay, all right, great. No, I don't want applause, I don't need that. I just want to make sure you guys are awake. So what I want to do is just kind of like talk about interviewing. I think, you know, you guys, I think of just, you know, taking time out of your day, come here and sort of really trying to understand how to get into the advertising business. Sonia covered the first part, and I'm going to cover kind of the interview part in terms of when she gets you in the door and gets you into my office or, you know, office of people on my team. The idea is, you know, is this the right person? Is this the right fit? So I want to talk a little bit about that. But before I do that, I want to show something for you guys to look at in terms of what's going on in the industry. Okay, so we didn't produce that. So first off, I want to say if you guys found the music annoying, I apologize. But I think the the important part about that, and what why I really want to open up the talk with it is because, I think it's really important. I mean, some of the stuff that I've seen today, I was here earlier looking at, work and in terms of people, doing live pitches and so on. And I think, not to take anything away from traditional advertising, TV commercials are great, print advertising is awesome. What I do in terms of heading up the experience design team at Digitas, though, focuses on sort of the next level of what advertising is and is becoming. And so I just want to make sure that we're all sort of level set on kind of how important this is. I mean, it's probably more important than even this video and you know, the words I can use can sort of describe. So you guys definitely, and I mean beyond just being sort of like social media strategists and social media evangelists, like I've seen some of those kinds of people today, and I think that's fine, but in terms of actually creating work that people will actually use. So not just see and be influenced by, but work that people actually use to facilitate something in their daily lives. So advertising is sort of moved from this place of, you know, communication and then persuasion to actually enabling things. Like, so that, I just want to make sure that you guys all get that that's what's in your hands, and it's not up to programmers or, you know, technologists or those kinds of people solely. It's definitely up to designers and people that have creative minds about tools that they could actually make that people can use. So I like to show work. Like, I just think it's you know, better to sort of see kind of like what's going on. So the world that we work in, here's a cool idea. This is from Dubai. You just take a look, it's about a minute or something.
Dammi pure un po' di aglio, cipolla, basilico, salsicci, peperoni. Prendi l'uovo e la farina, impasta, non ti fermare, che bella pizza che so fare.
Okay, so it was less than a minute. That's not the video I wanted to show you guys. That's a video more about how it works. But what that is basically a company in Dubai called Red Tomato Pizza. And what they do is they allow you to order a pizza from a fridge magnet. So you basically have a magnet on your fridge and you push the button and they actually deliver a pizza to your house. And they were just showing you kind of how that is set up. So basically using your mobile phone and Bluetooth, etc. And on the back end, they get the pizza to you in, you know, whatever, 15, 20 minutes. Now that's not something that's not really an ad, right, per se. But it's definitely something that's adding a tremendous amount of brand value and makes that company unforgettable. And again, that's in Dubai. That's not like, you know, New York or LA or something like someone here came up with that. So I'm just trying to show there are creative minds kind of all over the world kind of tackling what's going on with advertising and the change it's going through. One more video and then that's it.
E-Mart is the Walmart of Korea, with 141 chain stores across the nation. However, E-Mart has a weakness. The sales during lunchtime decrease drastically. Mission: to increase sales during lunchtime from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Idea: give people a unique experience, only available during lunch hours. Install a shadow QR code using the sunlight and shadow, only available from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. This event is called Sunny Sale. How to: scan the shadow QR code from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Automatically skip to the Sunny Sale mobile homepage and enjoy special offers, including a $12 coupon. Purchase items on the E-Mart application, and they will be delivered directly to your home. People were delighted to find small lunch surprises and enjoyed shopping via their smartphones. The Sunny Sale event, starting from 13 locations, has been expanded to 36 locations in Seoul. Result: over 12,000 coupons have been sold. In February, E-Mart membership increased by 58% from the previous month. A 25% increase in sales of E-Mart Mall during lunch hours, and media coverage on the shadow QR code promotion over the past few months. Also, the most notable result of the Sunny Sale was that it made people sunny for the day. Sunny Day, Sunny Sale, Sunny E-Mart.
So, and that's Korea, right? So the reason I show this stuff is because I want you guys to understand like the power that you're actually, you know, able to wield in this world. So I think, And again, I'm not taking anything away from, print advertising or showing me a print campaign or a storyboard for a TV commercial or anything like that. I mean, I think that's awesome. But there's a world that is here, and I'm really looking for people who can kind of create for that world, or at least thinking about creating for that world. So what I want to do is just talk about, like, when does the interview start? Like, pop quiz. When does the interview start? Someone. When does the interview start? Okay, a good answer. Okay. No, when does the interview start? Right, okay, very close. One more. When's the link? When is it? When you meet the receptionist. This guy, so what's your name? CM? Okay, so yeah, CM was as closest to right, because to me, the interview, like, recruit me and 3 or 4 other people on my team, in your work, what's your process for work? And oftentimes, even today, like, I'm still seeing finished work, which I think is fine, but as it pertains to experience design and designing for digital, like, I want to understand how you got to where you got to. I want to see the stuff that you threw away. I want to see your sketches. I want to see, how you collaborated. I want to see, like, what that looks like in a room, how you work with people. That, to me, is important. I mean, I think your work being strong, you wouldn't, have caught Sonia Zara or someone like her if your work wasn't strong. But at the end of the day, in terms of being able to add you to the team, like, the kinds of considerations we need to make is sort of like, how do you do your work? Are you like a lone person that has to work alone and you can't work with someone else? Or, can you work with a team? Can you add value to a team that may be stuck in a certain place and you come in and you can add value? So I think that's kind of important. And of course, how you make decisions, which the sketches kind of help us to see. Like, how did you come up with this? So these are just examples. I mean, these are my own sketches and stuff that I've done. And we work in all different kinds of formats. So, and I'm showing you guys this because it's really low fidelity. It's not super, we're all like illustrators and so on. It's just that we get up on a whiteboard and we say, okay, well, here are our thoughts. This is what I think. This is what you think. Let's sketch it out. And this is a redesign of Showtime Sports website. That's actually live today. If you go to showsports.com, you'll see stuff that came from, like, these kinds of sessions. So, and this is an ideation session, something that I did a while back for some stuff we're doing for McDonald's. So have a story, I think, is the second tip of 5. Stories move human beings. I mean, right now, to a certain extent, I'm up here telling you guys a story, but when you come in to interview, please have some kind of story. What I mean? Like, why are you here? How did you get into advertising? Why should I care about you? I mean, you can pick any sort of topic that you want for your story, but just have one, have questions that you want to ask about the firm and about the job and, all that sort of stuff. All of that makes for conversation versus interviewing, you know what I mean? Because you being interviewed, just that frame in and of itself puts you in a mental place that, for some people, they just don't put their best foot forward. So it's like, do I interview well? Do I not interview well? When it's really, okay, am I telling my story? Am I getting across the important things about me to this other person? What that is. So how you got here, why you're here, another point, one more, what moves you in terms of passion. I really like to hear, like, what are people passionate about? I think probably some of the biggest things I look for outside of passion, and not feigned passion, but real passion, is passion and curiosity. Like, what are you curious about? And please don't say I'm curious about advertising, because advertising is not really that curious. It's not that interesting. It's what makes advertising interesting is when it puts in stuff that makes life interesting. And, and those are the things that you need to be curious about. So third point, know your passion. Sort of know what drives you, know your discipline. So if you're coming into me, like, you're some kind of digital designer, art director, information architect, interaction designer, somewhere along that tree, visual designer, something like that. But I think even if you're going at traditional advertising, know your discipline, know who came before you, know how your discipline got started. I think those are, like, key points. Understand the trajectory. I talked to a couple of people in the live pitches about this. Like, understand, where do you want to go in this business? Because what happens is you have to end up working backwards to the first interview. So it's like, okay, I want to be CD, or I want to be this, or I want to be that, and you work backwards from that upwards. and I'm going to pass through. And again, what are you curious about? Talked about that. So have and make work. So this is a big deal. Again, I was sitting in the live pitches, and I'm sure you guys are out there with the portfolio reviews. And the reason that that's so important is because we need to see work, right? Not like we can't extrapolate or think about, okay, well, this person might be good here if we can't see what you actually do. I'm a writer or I'm a director, and I haven't heard of it up. I don't care if it's for your church, supermarket, your whatever. Like, find something that you're curious about, make some work around it. So even if you don't have work, say, okay, well, I don't have work, but here's some stuff that I came up with that I found interesting that I said, let me create a campaign around, or let me create some sort of experience around. And again, you don't have to code everything, program everything. You can just have sketches, have something that shows how you think, and how you come up with things. Volunteering, I think, is important. Obviously, it's another sort of path. Nonprofit organizations, that's a lot of what I did when I first got started, working with nonprofit arts organizations, museums, places that actually need your help are probably like right in your community. And I think, it's a good way of you getting some work to show if you're struggling in that area. And then this last point is about sort of leveraging fellowship. And that's part of what you're here today to do. So I would strongly, strongly recommend, there's Twitter, there's LinkedIn, but there's also offline communities as well. When I first started, Meetup was a really important thing for me. I looked for groups that talked about what I was interested in, interaction design, information architecture, joined those groups, went to them, and Meetups are free. There's probably school groups as well, if for the students out there. The One Club is awesome. If you can't afford the membership, tell them, hey, I'm interested in volunteering. Like, I want to just, you have to be around the people that you want to be, And I think if you take nothing else away from this, it's that. You know what I mean? Try to find how can you be around the people that you want to be. The people that are in the role that you're in, where do those people go? What organizations they belong to? What do they read? What are the conferences? Like, really, really think about that. Like, that is like super strategic, and honestly, it's the best way for you to be successful because you're just duplicating something else versus trying to bang your head up against the wall of, well, why are they seeing my book? Why isn't anyone seeing me? Well, what's going, just reach out to someone, and LinkedIn is a fabulous tool for that. You can, I have a card, and my information's up here. So, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll connect you to whoever, I can help you get connected to. And then, of course, manage your profile on and offline. When you integrate in these groups, it's not about going to a group and saying, oh, I want to be a part of this group, or standing off in the corner or anything like that. Find a way to be active. Find a way to make something in the group. People aren't getting together. It's one thing. Or you're in a group. Like, a lot of the groups I was a part of, there wasn't a lot of people, not a large amount of people of color in those groups. So I would push to, okay, well, let me get, some people of color together in this group, and let's have a session. Or, hey, we have a, why don't we do a conference? Why don't we do a workshop? Like, again, don't just be in the group as a member, be active in the group, making something in the group, and I'm just telling you that from personal experience, it's the fastest way to raise your profile, because everyone loves someone who's proactive, who likes to make stuff, who takes initiative. Like, all of those things are awesome, and you do it in those professional groups, Meetup and Interaction Design Association, and there's a bunch of digital design-oriented groups. You do that in those kinds of groups, everyone starts to know your name, and the people in those groups work at the agencies that you want to work at. So, you see how that works. It's like you don't even have to, and there's nothing wrong with this event, obviously. This is a fantastic thing. But in addition to doing this, doing stuff like that, it's like, oh yeah, I know this person. Oh yeah, I know that person. Yeah, I've seen that, and your name starts to sort of rise and you get known. So references, again, I've just talked about this, just networking I think is really, really important. Join and volunteer with groups to get started. And I think that's it. Thank you guys. So, where's that time person? Time? Anyone with time? Or we're just gonna run the room? We're gonna take over the room. Okay. Q&A, like any questions you guys have. We're open. Like, how do you make yourself viable in the digital world? Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I came in a little later.
Okay.
How would one find a recruiter? If I was looking for a recruiter, like say a LinkedIn.
Right.
Right.
A lot of times it seems like that's not as easy to just reach out to a recruiter directly.
You have one right here.
Okay, were you here when I walked through the LinkedIn and how to do a search?
Yeah, I did. I came in at the end of that.
Okay, well, are you familiar with the search option? If you go in and you're looking for a creative recruiter, you would pretty much put in the keyword creative, look for recruiter in your zip code, and the list of recruiters would be there. You can connect with them. We usually have our contact information because we'd love to be found. And send us as much information about yourself, your background, your interest, and we'll start thinking right away about things we can do for you.
Okay, so that's, I can use search all the recruiters in my zip code that way.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yeah.
How important are technical skills as far as digital is concerned?
Yeah.
Should you invest a
Yeah.
lot of time and effort into knowing that aspect?
Yeah. Well, I'll put it this way. I think I'm going to say something that, I don't know, hopefully it's not controversial. I try to be candid. But having some technical capability in digital is like knowing how to read and write if you're trying to be a writer, like a copywriter or something like that. So that's one answer, one part of the answer. The second part of the answer is you don't need to be able to code your own application and write, objectives. You don't need to go that far, But HTML and HTML5 and some of the tools, when I started in a program called Front Page, Microsoft Front Page. This was probably 96. I started writing HTML. So, and I only did it because I wanted to control what I was designing. And it's that passion for what you're making that you won't even realize when you became technical. You just be like, oh, yeah, I can do this. It's no big deal. So I'd say HTML is kind of key, but with programs like Dreamweaver, I use a program now called Coda. A lot of them will write HTML for you. So you just do dropping in images, and then you have a screen and that's one of the things I'll say if anyone's interested in this. Coda and Dreamweaver always have a code view visible, because although they make it easy, you can drop in your images, the stuff that you do in Photoshop and make your website, interface and all that. They'll show you the code that's actually driving what you're doing with positioning, and that's how you learn. That's how I learn. You know what I mean? Creating and trying to write HTML in abstract is just, you're not really empowered by it. I mean, I would design something first and say, okay, this is what I designed, this is a website, I want to make it real. And then you go about doing that. And it's going to be hard. It's like getting lost one or two good times, but after that, then you're like, okay, I know the way. You know what I mean? So, but I would say you absolutely HTML, HTML5 at least, a little bit of JavaScript, but not using JavaScript to code anything, but more so to there's all these frameworks that make it super easy, just 2-3 lines that you have to put in, literally copy and paste, that does different effects on the screen. And then once you see that, you're like, oh, you can look and, and you start to learn. I mean, if you're learning on your own. But if you have a school program or classes and workshops that you can take, by all means, I would take it. Because it just adds value to you. So you could be an art director, know Photoshop, Illustrator, all that stuff cold, know your typography, colors, all that, and get hired and be working, be fine. So I'm not saying you need that. But if you came in with all of that and said okay, I also know some HTML, so I can actually prototype this screen I'm designing to see how it would feel when people actually click this or touch that, or people oh, we have to hire this person. Because I'm telling you, no agency in this whole building has enough of those people. They either have programmers or they have art directors who don't know how to code, So, yes, you, and then.
What if you're an art director that has knowledge of code,
Right.
HTML, CSS,
Right. Oh, and I forgot CSS. That's important. Yeah.
But you don't really have actual working HTML. So you can do it.
Right.
There's nothing that you've done
Right.
for real. How do you start getting together that kind of portfolio?
Well, I think it first has to start with understanding, as I was saying, understanding who you want to be, right? So if you want to be a developer, then you have to go a different track. If you want to be an art director, then for me, it's about really making sure your ideas are solid. It's not about getting caught up in the code. It's about code to realize your ideas, but it isn't about getting caught up in that. So I think it's really about making sure that what you're designing really holds muster. And what I do it almost weekly now. I go through different web galleries and mobile app galleries to just look at what other people are doing. It's the fastest way to get good, honestly. And Picasso said it. I mean, good artists borrow, great artists steal. You just you steal stuff. You look and you say, wow, I like that effect. How did this person do that? And you go into Photoshop or you Google it and they'll show you how to make really pretty interfaces, really functional interfaces, and that's how you start to learn. And if you can do that, you'll get hired. I mean, and then the code and stuff, you're like, hey, I'm working on that, but that's not what's gonna put you over the edge, in the end. It's really what you're being hired to do, which is coming up with good ideas that you can execute, and then, the execution with code is a whole other level. There's just one guy here and then back. Yep. Oh, sorry. Please see me or see us after. Yeah.
Can you talk about the line between being ambitious and annoying as far as initial contact?
You said ambitious and annoying?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
With recruiters or just...
For the record, annoying people don't ask that kind of question.
What's helpful is if you gave as much information about yourself as possible at the beginning and what you were looking for, and then we would pretty much tell you where it would stand. And I think what's fair is a once-a-month check-in. More than that would probably be overkill. But I do like to keep, I like proactive people because sometimes I don't have an open for them at that time, but I might a month later, which is why I think the once-a-month check-in is good. But really ask recruiters to give you honest feedback because not all recruiters will tell you it's just not very good. If you ask for feedback and constructive criticism, then you'll know if you're really in consideration or not. So I would ask for that.
Really, really important. So I just wanted to say thank you guys again for coming and sitting through. The one thing I'll say, before the applause, the one thing I'll say is that at this event, I think the important thing, to Sonia's point, is just really understanding how ready you are. Like really being able to get an honest assessment from people about your readiness. Because it's like, there's some people in this event that are not ready. And I think the best thing we can do to tell you guys is that you're not ready and here's why, blah, 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 blah. And then you move towards a path of readiness and then getting what you guys want. So thank you guys so much. Yeah.